Okay, welcome everybody to our class with David Harshada Wagner. My name is Adriana, for those of you I don't know, um, and welcome David.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, so the topic for this class, and I'll share with you a little bit about my intention and then a little bit about David, but the topic is God as love and the spiritual path of parenting. And I have known David for a very long time, probably like 10 years. And he is, I was just thinking about why I was doing this right before this. It's always good to connect to why you're doing something. And I was thinking about, just how much David, about um, traditional teachings and how, there's so many of us that are yoga teachers and meditation teachers and, even all the celebrities now, like Britney Spears is like, doing yoga on her Instagram. And, everyone's like awakening in this way, in this day and age. And you've been on the path for, decades. And so I'm super honored to have you here and to share, to receive, a lot of your wisdom and especially from your vast Gemini knowledge of all this mystical spiritual teachings, but also how you've lived through them and with them for some time. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
I'm going to keep bringing people into the group. So everyone's a yogi. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's like really what's happening now. But part of why I wanted to share this was also just to, it's nice to for us to connect in a way where it's just easeful and you could just kind of show up. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat and we'll get to them. But there's a few main things that I wanted to talk to you all about today. And I know David has a parenting workshop coming up and I have a wounded healers training coming up. And we just wanted to kind of connect in with you and offer a little bit of like solace and refuge, for this time that we're inside of. And the longer it goes on, it seems like it feels like less and less real in a certain way. I would assume most of us on this call are pretty privileged. And on another level, it's like, it's getting more and more intense in terms of like, what are we doing? And, there's so much confusion and so much chaos. And I know in moments of confusion and chaos, it's been super imperative for me to have a relationship to God. And so I'd love to hear your insights on, what God is. And, so many people that we work with have so much wounding around it. And we come from a lot of this kind of perspective of oneness, that God's within us. But, I wanted to hear, both from that aspect of, what you always talk about as like the God, the parcel of God that's within us. That's what you always say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, what having a more dualistic kind of approach to God, like in Bhakti yoga, or even if, Christians that are really tuned in to the actual teachings of Jesus, like what is the benefit of both having a taste of that God within, but also having a way to worship?
Yeah. Yeah. Is that the first cue?
Yeah, my questions are more like conversation. I'm like, my
Yeah.
interviews are not actual like interviews. They're like I talk and then you can, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's the first inquiry.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so, I love that. And I agree. It's like when we come into the end, whether it's like the end of our life and we're facing our own death or we're facing the collapse of something that is really important to us, or we're facing like the death of our lifestyle or the threat to our existence. And all of that is happening. All of that is happening for people right now. And I talked about this a little bit yesterday in my class, but Patanjali talks about abhinavesha, which is this basic thing that all living beings are hardwired with, the desire to live and the sort of not necessarily fear of death, but we don't want to die if we're healthy. And so, the same thing where that cricket is running from the lizard to save its life, or the gazelle is running from the cheetah, that same impulse is there for us as a society right now, where, we're running from the coronavirus, or we're running from the collapse of our economy, or we're running from the, destruction of democracy, and just, take your pick. There's so many of these big things that are like up for people right now. And if we have God, it can either be something that just makes everything worse, and I'll talk about that in a second, or it becomes the thing that makes everything better. And when it makes it worse is when it's some kind of a religious God, because then we'll just explain, it just becomes this mental thing that just explains everything. Well, it doesn't matter that I'm dying because I'm going to go to heaven. Or, yeah, well, the reason why we're having this coronavirus is because we're being punished because of gay people. Or, fill in the blank, whatever that sort of weird God religious thing is. It just makes everything sort of worse. Or, why me? Why is this happening to me? I have followed all of God's commandments. And, why does my shop get closed during coronavirus, But if we have this other experience of God that you could call more of a yogic experience of God, meaning experiential, that's a piece of it, but there's this other piece of it that I want to talk about today. When we have this yogic experience of God, then that is the thing that actually gives us solace. That it's like, yeah, my shop is closing, but there's something beyond my shop. It's like, yeah, my body is closing. Yeah, I'm dying, but there's something beyond my body. And it's not just a religious idea, but it's some sort of a relationship that we have with that energy. Now, the thing is that all of these religious guys have muddied those waters so much that people can't even hear the word God without getting contracted. And a big no comes up for them, just even if we say God. Like, I keep on saying it in this, and I know that there are some people that are watching that every time I say it, they get a little bit puckered, And if I were to like pull up a Bible and start reading from the Bible, then it'd be like absolute, puckering happening. And I get that. And also I just think that it's worthwhile getting over it. Mm-hmm. Like, I came into the spiritual path as a drug addict who was getting sober and clean. And, God was a part of the 12 steps. And nowadays you can do the 12 steps without God. You can go to like refuge recovery and do like Buddhist approach to recovery it's non-theistic. It doesn't have God in it. In those days, there wasn't any such thing. And, especially in Peoria, Illinois in the 80s. And so they were just like, yeah, well, what do you want more? Do you want to hold on to your ideas about God or do you want to like let go of that and be open and get well? And I was like, I think I'll get well. So I got over it. But the whole thing was that we got to develop a relationship with the God of our understanding. And for me, that meant that, it couldn't be a hymn. And I remember, like, as a little whippersnapper in, sobriety, wanting to change the 12 steps where it said, like, we surrender our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him. And I wanted to change it to say it. See, I was doing pronouns before anybody was doing pronouns, just for the record. But ultimately, that's what I had to do in my head, and slowly I did have that relationship and did have the experience of turning my will and my life over to that care of God as I understood it. And then eventually it was okay for it to be a him or a her or an it. But it had to be relational instead of conceptual. You know what I mean? Like it had to be something that was like an experience rather than an idea. That's the first part of, I'm going to say this whole thing, then I want to hear your reflection on that, Adriana, but because I was just contemplating this morning, thinking about this class. So I talk about that a lot, about it needing to be like authentic, it needing to be relational, it needing to be something that actually helps us, right? But then there's this other aspect of the yogic relationship with God that I don't think I've ever articulated before, which is that we need to have a transformation in the relationship while the relationship is happening. And that relationship has to be one where we can't stay in whatever state we started in. Like, for instance, if we have this mighty God, but we stay as this like tiny schmuck, that's not going to work. Because that's just going to solidify our tiny schmuckiness. Like, but if this mighty God that we have, let's say in whatever the thing is that we're practicing, is about helping us to rise up from our schmuckiness, well, then that can be useful. But if we're just relating from our tiny schmuckiness, then we just form a religion and we just talk about how great the God is all the time, and we just gather all the other tiny schmucky people and we create a religion. Same thing goes for a yoga thing, where like we have like the big guru, and then the little schmucky disciple. And the thing is it's right there in the teachings where it says like Ishwaro Guru Atmeti, like the God and the guru and the inner self, it's like all one thing. And that on the mystical path, on the yogic path, that's what we're called into. Is we're called into a transformation where we are seeing ourselves as great too. And we're also seeing this other thing, this power greater than ourselves, as great as well. And that's something that's really hard for modern people to do for some reason. We know how to make the big things small and be like, oh, it doesn't matter. Oh, it's all bullshit. Like, yeah, I'm great. I'm God. Yeah, everyone is God. Like my dog is God. My dog is my guru. And people will say that, and I kind of know what they mean, but they're selling themselves short when they do that. Because like to actually have God in your house, to actually have that guru power in your house, man, it's going to be like transforming you and caterpillar to the butterflying you. If your dog is really your guru, it's going to be fucking transforming you and just turning you inside out. And but when we say that, what we're saying is like, well, I don't want to be in this old patriarchal thing of having a guru on a throne, whatever, and bow down at their feet. I don't want to get into that. So I'm going to just say, my cat is my God. But the cat's just a cat. And yeah, the cat is God too from that non-dualistic point of view, but most of us aren't living on that non-dualistic point of view.
Yeah, I think that, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think that that's the key.
My kids are my guru. That's the other thing. I'll talk about that when we talk about the parenting, but go ahead.
Say that again.
People will say my kid is my guru, or my kids are that's my guru. I'll talk about that in a minute when we talk about
that. It's funny because I was thinking about that the other day, and part of why I wanted to do this and have everybody here is like to get healing around the wounding, because I think I love everything you just shared, and I think part of why we do that as people is because it's actually really scary, because there's so much trauma and so much wounding within us that we don't actually know until we have someone in our life that can really kind of confirm that it is a good thing. That in this moment of our evolution, I think it's still really scary. So like we make our cat or our dog or everybody is God, and you know what I mean, we just kind of flop around and we suffer more, I think, when a lot of that can be relieved through this relationship that you're speaking to, that I know you hold so strongly. So I just want everybody listening to this too to really like receive and absorb the kind of energetic transmission and energy of what you're sharing, because there's so much healing that can happen even in this moment around that. And the other thing I want to say that you just said about the kids being the guru, because I think about that, and like, you know, David is my beloved and my partner, and he has 2 kids. And the other day when I was at the river bottom with them, I was asking Jackson, what, like, I was like trying to pry, like, well, what were you in your past life? I was asking them both, you know, cause like you have like this idea that like, well, the kids are going to know. And like your kids are just, they're so amazing and hilarious on so many levels, but it's like, they won't satisfy, like on that level for some reason, they just like won't satisfy, even though, you know, they're like totally cosmic, amazing beings, just like all kids and like angels and rainbow children. And obviously if they came through you and you're, you know, their mom, then clearly they, you know, came here to do something amazing and big. But it was just so funny because I'm like, well, Rabia, what were you in your past life? And they were just like, nothing. Like they just like were just like not giving me anything. I'm like, well, are you sure? Like if you kind of think about it, like I was trying to like coach them into giving some like, you know, answer that was going to make me feel better about, you know, life, but they wouldn't anyway.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's the thing is, you know, when we look at this process of taking the baby out of the bathwater, you know, and looking at, you know, talking about God, talking about spiritual community, talking about spiritual path, talking about spiritual discipline, talk about living by spiritual principles. That's another thing that'll trigger the shit out of people. It's really valuable. And actually super life-saving, especially when the shit hits the fan in our life. But it's something that we have to approach with a lot of sensitivity. And just like we have to really just make it real, you know? Because there's all of that other stuff. So even with kids, I know people who have kids that'll give you a whole thing. They'll be like, yeah, I was in Atlantis in my last life. It's like, oh, really? Where did you learn that? From your parents that believe in Atlantis, you know? And that's like, you know, it's like it's doing both Atlantis, if you believe in that, and also the kid a disservice if we lay all of those kinds of trips on people, you know? And that's why I think it's so fun, you know, because the kids will just be like, nothing, you know, like, what were you in a past life? Nothing. Or, you know, like sperm, I don't know, like what were you, you know, they'll just say something super concrete, and that's beautiful because for them, the whole world is still a mystery, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I'd love to hear if for any of you that are here right now, just you can type in the chat, just anything that is coming up for you around, you know, any of the things that we're sharing, and we can kind of, you know, have this be a little bit more of a interactive if anything comes up as we're sharing. And kind of sticking with this topic for a little bit longer, you know, what are some of the ideas that you have, because you've worked with so many people around this, and what are some of the like ideas and that people that we have that really are like barriers to that relationship with God?
Yeah. I'm just reflecting on it. I think that there's intrinsic ones and extrinsic ones. And the extrinsic ones are what we talked about already. And it's just like all these ideas that like God is either the God that the patriarchs talk about, which is this angry, judging, homophobic, you know, heteronormative, cruel, one-sided
Sky Daddy.
Yeah.
I always love when you said that.
Or all of that is total bullshit and it doesn't exist. And they're the proof of it. You want to know if God exists? Just look at the priests that molest people. You want to know if God exists? Just look at, Daesh, the ISIS, the Taliban or whatever. So that's an extrinsic thing. Or, I don't want to practice yoga. I don't want to talk about Kundalini. Look at this guy. Look at Yogi Bhajan. Look, he, raped these people and he's this awful, charlatan. There's all of this extrinsic kind of stuff that becomes barriers for people. Or the intrinsic things, which really the extrinsic things are all rooted to. But the intrinsic things are, yoga teaches us that we have this like magnificent power in us, inborn, but then yoga also teaches us that we also have hardwired in us barriers to that. That hardwired in us is a sense of unworthiness. That hardwired in us is a sense of like, no, I'm not this big magnificent thing. That's already hardwired in us. And then we're in a herd of people who also, chances are, the herd of people that we're a part of is, I'm just like distracted looking at Joe's fingers on like coming in and out of her camera. She's like touching her thing. And then chances are we live in a herd of people who are kind of in this mass conspiracy to stay small and to stay mental. And, I think between those two things, it's like in order to really be a modern day mystic, you have to be quite punk rock. Like you have to really if you're in a religion, you have to be an outsider within the religion. And if you're not in a religion, then you have to be an outsider within society. And even if the religion isn't like Judaism or Christianity or something, even if the religion is like the modern yoga wellness religion, that it's like, oh, well, Stacy, when she was doing yoga classes all the time, that was okay. But now she's talking about God. Like, it just kind of freaks me out. Or, you know what I mean? It's like, even within that, there still is this like outsider kind of move that has to happen. And we're just wired to be herd animals. We're not wired to be outsiders.
Yeah. And you feel like having that, like breaking through those barriers, help us to kind of be, I almost just, like what's coming up is like, because I think that feeling of being an outsider, it never really goes away if you're like really doing it, I don't think, because even though we find common places and, like-minded like communities and friends, but it's like, as soon as that, the essence of like what keeps us kind of strung along to, that actual truth of belonging, which is kind of our sense of not belonging, we kind of, we lose something, because oftentimes we give our power over to something else, that isn't that, it isn't a higher power. It's like a person or a system or a yoga, and then the yoga or the practice works to a certain point, and then everything stops working at some point. And so I love what you're sharing, because I think it's kind of pulling us into like, what is at the core, what could be at the core of then all the practices we do, they have that essence within them, and then it's not so much like this dependence, just like addiction, like we get addicted to all these things, which, we go through phases of that. I mean, I know I have, that, but then, it runs dry, the well runs dry. So do you want to read a couple of these comments and answer to, and, respond to them, and then we'll move into the, into the parenting piece.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just, there's a piece of that I wanted to reflect on too. But that's the thing, is like, I think that we have to face death in that Abhinavesha sense, if we're really going to step into the spiritual path. And that means, by its very nature, step out of safety, you know? And once you step out of safety, then it's really easy to fall into all these other dangerous things. And, you know, that's why we get into cults. And that's why, you know, and it's like, if people listen to somebody like Adriana, and right from the very beginning, you have this awareness that's like, oh, I'm going to go through these different chapters of my spiritual life. And this thing that is like the chapter right now that seems like it's the be all end all is probably something with a beginning, middle, and an end. And to just have that awareness a little bit in the beginning, you know, and then, you know, so because even with something silly like, oh, my cat is my guru, or the plant medicine is my teacher. Okay, right now in this second, maybe it's your teacher, but just have the awareness that that teacher is leading you to another teacher. You know, that this chapter is, this awakening is, you know, first you wake up and you're just staring at the ceiling, and then you get out of bed. And then you stumble to your, you know, cup of coffee, and then you wake up a little bit more. And, you know, it's like, there are all these phases. Let's see what people have written.
I think it's so challenging because there's not, you know, because it's always that there's always some of that sense of uncertainty, you know, that can, for some of us, be so loud that it can really consume, you know, when we're not really utilizing that sense of uncertainty in a way that really supports that. It's hard, you know.
So I'm going to go from the bottom up. So Jen, you know, says like, well, what about when trying to own being an outsider just starts to reinforce or surrender to, you know, being an outsider reinforces the unworthiness. And yeah, I mean, I definitely know what that's like, because it gets old after a while. It's like, I don't want to be an outsider all the time. I want to be like an insider always. Like, I want to be, you know, like I want to sit at the cool kids table of whatever. One of the things, and this is kind of almost a silly thing, but I just love to take refuge in heroes. And just like how most of my heroes were outsiders. Most of my heroes, whether they are spiritual heroes or whether they were like artistic heroes, filmmakers, or, you know, rock musicians, or, you know, like all of the great ones were all outsiders. You know, it's like a well-established thing that's just part of being unique, is that everyone else is going to shit on, you know, what you're doing, whether you're, you know, looking at, I don't know, Jimi Hendrix or Jesus Christ, you know, or your, whatever the case may be, pick your favorite author, and chances are they didn't just like come up through the establishment. You know, they weren't just like heralded by the powers that be. You know, all the great ones were crucified. You know, everybody must get stoned. Bob Dylan, another great outsider, once said. Let's see. And then Joe said, how do we stay in God grace when we are openly suffering, such as explosive anger, rage? Is God with me when I'm showing my ass? Yeah. Is it my fur and whiskers that I oppress my soul? Yeah, that's just it, Joe, is that I feel like that is. So one of the questions that came, and I don't remember if you said it, Adriana, or you wrote it, but it was like to look at like non-dualistic ideas about God. Like God is everything. God is everyone. There is no good and evil. You know, that's non-dualism. As opposed to helpful dualisms like bhakti yoga, like I'm the disciple and God is my beloved. And, you know, one of the useful things about the dualistic idea is that it can help us to strive towards higher and higher vibrations, better and better vibrations. Because yes, a sink full of dishes is God, and a clean sink is God. I, and just about everyone else, is going to stand above a clean sink and be easier. It's going to be easier to connect to God than standing in front of a big sink full of dirty dishes with flies buzzing around it. Mm. It's all God, but like one has a vibration that is a little bit more open than the other one. Okay. So that's when the dualistic thing is useful. You know, if you eat high vibe food, you'll feel like you have a more high vibe body. If you use more high vibe language, then you'll have a more high vibe mind, that kind of thing. When we get into trouble with the dualistic thing is when it gives us the idea that God is going to abandon us if we don't act right. That God is going to abandon us, punish us, that grace is going to leave us if we don't follow the commandments, whatever the commandments are. And somewhere in your wiring there, Joe, you have this commandment of like, do not rage. Thou shalt not rage. Thou shalt not show thy ass, you know? And the thing is like, God is happy with you showing your, God made your ass. God made your rage. God has no problem with your ass or your rage. The thing is that when you're showing your ass, God doesn't go anywhere. Grace doesn't go anywhere. But chances are, if you're raging and showing your ass, it's just going to be harder for you to remember. Because in those moments, if we're in rage, that means that we're probably like clenched onto something else that's not God. I mean, sometimes we rage at God too. But, you know, I'm assuming that what you're talking about, or those are happening in these moments of forgetfulness. But if I forget that I've got, you know, some fresh cheese in the fridge, that doesn't mean that there's no more fresh cheese in the fridge. It's there waiting for me, you know? And I'm right next to my fridge. That's part of why I'm referring to it. But, and it's the same way with God. It's not like, you know, all of those commandments, all of those things, you know, it's not that those things are going to separate God from us, but they might separate us from God. Just because of how we are, and it might make us forget, or might make us turn away, or might reinforce our unworthiness in such a way that we just don't even feel like we're allowed to go back into that presence of grace.
Yeah, I love that distinction that you're making.
God doesn't do anything.
Yeah, just of like that God made that. I think that there's something so potent about that. And, you know, I know from my experience, especially working with emotions, and I know especially for, you know, women identified beings, I mean, that's just like anger and rage or things that, like, you know, you got put in like mental hospitals more by like the, you know, the church or whatever, you know. So it's like to really actually, I know, and then what David's saying too, of like, then if we're only inside of that, then we're also not, there's something intuitive within us that knows that that's not it either. It's not just like, well, I just want to be rageful all the time. It's like, well, no, you don't. It feels like shit. That's why. But I think that when we set places for it to actually, to experience it consciously, because that's the difference. It's like, it's unconscious or it's conscious. So if you're like, I'm going through a hard moment of hostility. Someone else wrote something about talking about hostility or of anger, of rage. So, you know, this week in my practice, part of my meditation practice, like David has taught this in his classes, and we do this a lot in our practice too, of like, I'm going to scream into a pillow. I'm make 5 minutes of my meditation practice where I'm like pounding something and getting the aggression and the hostility out of my body and putting it in the arms of grace. It's like the disqualification that we oftentimes feel that our emotions and our sexuality or whatever else it is, that it's not justified. It's not allowed to be in God's grace. When
our laziness.
Yeah.
Or, you know, so many things. I'll tell you this story. So I was in India. I have my japa mala here. I was in India one time sitting in the Shiva temple and by myself, And I was repeating the mantra using my japa mala. And technically, according to the Hindu religion, you don't touch your japa mala beads with your index finger. It's associated with the ego and whatever. It doesn't matter. But technically, when you do japa, you're supposed to hold the beads in your right hand and pass them between your middle finger. Because it's funny, because like to the Hindus, this finger is offensive. But to us, this finger is offensive. But in Hinduism, it's all good. So in fact, you'll even see like Hindu people will point with this finger. It's very funny. Anyway, so I was sitting there and respecting the culture and the custom. I started off repeating the mantra. I was sitting there in the temple for a long time doing mantra. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. And eventually I just became very intoxicated. And then I don't know what I was doing. I was there for a while. And so afterwards I came out and I was in the courtyard and just kind of blissed out. And this Hindu guy comes up to me and he's like, Hari Om. And he said, I saw you there in the temple, doing your mantra, and like it was very good. It's very good. It's like, he's like, but I saw how you were doing it, and we're not supposed to use this finger when we do it. And I said, I know, but I started like the right way, and then I don't know, I just got intoxicated with it. And I said, but let me ask you something. I said, who made this finger? And he looked at it and he was like, God. And I was like, yeah, so no problem. And he was like, yeah. He said, thank you. And he went off and I saw him like go over to this other group of Hindus and I couldn't hear what he was saying, but he was like doing with his finger like this. And like he had this like revelation about it. It's like, yeah. So it's like whatever the thing is, ultimately God is going to be there. God is on the toilet and God is, in your dark night of the soul. And, God is there when you're playing Candy Crush for 2 hours on your phone. But it's just like chances are you're not playing Candy Crush to find God. So that's what it is more than anything. It's like you said, it's just like whether we're conscious or unconscious or remembering or not.
Yeah, and I love that the idea, because like at some point, maybe, that man's, his learning of that, was something that was bringing him closer to God. And just like, I think, something that I know I gained so much from your teaching is that, ultimately whatever it is that we learn intellectually and practices that take us closer to God, especially if that's our intention, we'll experience it if that's our intention eventually, or when grace comes. But that will also then become the barrier, so that's how these ideas are, they're limited, but they're also, it's like our practice. It's like we could say that practice isn't God, but it doesn't mean you don't practice.
Yeah, totally. And all of those things are so valuable because they interrupt our common way of doing things. It's like, no, in this path, we wear a hat, we don't eat meat except on certain days. You do this mantra with this kind of a thing, and you don't use this finger, and you wash your feet before you pray, and whatever the thing is, every one of these things has got something different. I mean, that should be a hint in and of itself. Listen, if you're interested, you guys, in coronavirus, Google George Carlin religious hats. And he has this like totally hilarious bit about how all the religions have some obsession with hats. Like you take your hat off in church, but in a synagogue, you always wear a yarmulke. And the bishop wears a big hat and somebody else wears, and like women cover their head in some cases and they don't cover it. It's so funny. Anyway, they've all got something different, but what they all have in common is that they sort of like, they wake us out of our ordinary way of being. And they just kind of heighten our senses. But then if we do it all the time, then pretty soon we've turned into some orthodox dickhead who just does all of these religious things all the time and wears a funny hat all the time and follows all these rules. But like all of that has just become a noose around their neck and around the necks of everyone around them, including their family. And like how when it comes to parenting, how soulful parenting is in many ways the opposite of religious parenting. You know, people come to my homeschool with Harshada class and they think that I'm going to be teaching their kids to meditate or be like good yogis or Hindus or something. And instead we're, you know, making these ridiculous art things and, you know, having fun the way that the kids do. We don't want to indoctrinate people.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's a good segue into one of the things that I'm really curious about in terms of parenting. And, you know, you are you're such a devoted, I mean, you've been on a spiritual path since you were 16, you know, and your whole life, you know, has been devoted to God, you know, and now, you know, in these over the past 10 years, you've entered into a whole new realm of family and, you know, having children and being just in the whole swirl of that. And I know so many people really struggle with what seems like the split between like the mystic within us and the one who is like showing up and like, you know, sorting out arguments between your kids and, you know, and so many, and making macaroni and cheese like every day. And, you know, like the monotony and like how like kids thrive on like, you know, like all the things that are, they're so seemingly opposite sometimes, you know, and I know for a lot of people, they really feel like that. And I think, so that's one thing I wanted to hear you share about. And then the other thing is just like, when you do have this relationship to God as you understand it, which I would assume a lot of people that are listening and will be watching this do, you also know like the impermanence of life and of love and like I could cry just like talking about it. And so, you know, I don't have my own kids, but just feeling into like the intensity of that relationship and that karma and like being so open to that. And how have you found that that's kind of deepened your own experience of mystical love?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a thing where, you know, when I was younger in, you know, like in the ashram, like in spiritual community and, you know, people my age were getting married and having kids when they were relatively young. And I would just see their spiritual life just like go into the ditch. You know, like I actively observed this again and again. And I made a decision or made a wish, I suppose, where I said, you know, if I'm going to be a dad, I don't want to be a dad until I'm really established in my spiritual maturity. And so in a way, I waited until I was. And then it still is like, I mean, it still goes into the ditch all the time. I think that what waiting did is that my spirituality goes into the ditch, but because I waited until I was in my spiritual maturity, now my spiritual my spiritual state is like, it's like a tank or it's like a 4-wheel drive or something like that can get out of the ditch, you know? Whereas, you know, earlier in my life, I think I would have stayed in the ditch the way that I observed with others. Because, you know, like being a parent with little kids, it's like the kids are in samsara. It's the fancy word, but like the ocean of worldliness. That's what their curriculum is. You know, that's why I don't really like to indoctrinate kids with a lot of spiritual teachings and stuff, because that's not their curriculum. Their curriculum is to learn about the world. It's to learn about their bodies. It's to learn to just like be in that ocean, the Bhava Sagara, the ocean of temporary feelings. And that's just where they're at. And I believe, and I've made the choice to parent them in the ocean. instead of trying to be some sort of a remote yogi parent that stands on the shore. I have made the choice to just get in the water with them to parent. And what that looks like is, it looks like being aggravated and full of desires and aversions and fears, all of these, what we call kleshas in the yoga language. And just have those be part of the ensemble of my life. And be able to maintain a deep connection with God, and that kind of like bedrock connection with God amidst all of that. And, I think that's the big challenge. And it's the beauty of it, but it's also, why it can just be so damn hard for people, and why a lot of parents are just like, nah, I'm going to wait until my kids go to college, then I'm going to start my spiritual practice again, or I'm only going to use my spiritual practices to cope with the pain in the ass that being a parent is. That's the other kind of pitfall, as opposed to being like, yeah, my kids are not my guru, but my kids are definitely used by my guru. You know what I mean? They're not the guru, but that power of transformation sure as hell uses them as its agent for me. That's the distinction in the language.
Yeah, I love that. And I think even being reminded of that, it kind of, it can help to make that shift, like in those moments of when you're like in the ocean. I like that you called it an ocean. Sometimes it feels like a fire or something to me, like in terms of talking about like relating to, whether we're talking about relating to kids or just any other human, even, or just to our own inner children, that like, I think just for a really long time, none of that was a part of, maybe it was assumed that like everything is God and, that it's all grace, right? But it's like to actually be inside of the practice of allowing it to transform you on that inner level. It's really intense, just like our anger, just like, what I mean? Failure and all these things that we experience. We're not taking ourselves out of the world to have this, mystical connection, but we actually allow the suffering to break us open even more.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the water thing is a really apt, I think it's an apt symbol, like the healing, like the living waters healing thing that Adriana and I do, where when we do healing on people, we use water, sometimes we'll just take them and like put them in water, or we'll use water on our hands, and it like, there's a intimacy, there's a bonding there. And I think that's what it's really about when we're either parenting kids or we're like parenting ourselves, is that, like, I understand the fire thing too, but it's like you come out of the fire and the fire stays there. You come out of the water and the water's on you. And it's like, that's how you have to be willing, I think, the same way that when you're relating to God, you have to be in this space of like transformation. Not trying to just stay what you are and relate to God. And I think it's in the same way when you're relating to kids, where it's like, if you feel like you're going to stay on your high horse and parent them from there, I think it's very difficult. As opposed to, being willing to learn, being willing to be humble, being willing to like open yourself to their irrational beliefs and their emotional explosions and they're just like their desperate need. And it's the same way with the inner children pieces that we have. Even if we're not working with kids, but we're working with those pieces inside of us. If we're trying to relate to our inner child from some like highfalutin, sterile yogi place, it's not going to do it. We have to be willing to look at it, like talk to the inner child and just let them like slobber on us and cry on us and like you know, like it's a mess. It's a mess.
Yeah, but I love that. I think because it's like, it really is like, I mean, just because I also work with so many people, and it's like whenever any of us are not doing well, we're just really like pushing that away. We're like pushing that relationship away. And
Yeah.
it seems like, like alongside like meditating and doing all these other things that we do to connect to spirit, to make ourselves feel the relief of suffering, it's like this is a huge piece of it, is opening ourselves up to that relationship, and to, like you said, being inside, being like choosing to be inside of it, and letting it, and choosing to be inside of it without like trying to control it,
Yeah.
surrendering in it.
Yeah. So, and surrendering in, like, there's like a fixedness to being a parent too, that people that aren't parents, especially these days, and I mean, this because, there's a big community of sort of like young, unattached yoga teachers, like young, unattached spiritual nomads and seekers. And the teaching is just like, no, just choose the relationship that you want to have and just insist on that, and like choose the life that you want to have. And if you only want to work 2 days a week, then you must only work 2 days a week. And you need to honor yourself and have as many orgasms as you want to have every week, and have all the pleasure that you want to have all the time, and just have everything that you want exactly how you fucking want it all the fucking time, or else you're failing spiritually. That's kind of the message. And as a parent, there's so many things that are like, no, I'm not going to have all the orgasms that I want to have all the time. I'll be lucky if I get a couple good ones, over a patch of time when the kids are there. I'm not going to be able to just like travel wherever and work only as much as I want. And, all of those kinds of things. The principle is still true as far as like manifesting our life the way that we want to. But, then you're intrinsically bound in karma with these other beings, and you're responsible for something other than just your own satisfaction. And that's also a trip, man. It's like, it's so hard to accept those givens and accept those kind of karmic restrictions without then just becoming a slave to them, and throwing away that whole doctrine of make my life the way that I want it. Yeah. It's like to learn how to take that baby of that and apply it within the context of being a parent. That is also a major challenge, whether, it's the transcendental piece and like really being able to stay connected and, like enlightened all the time, or whether it's that manifestation tantric piece of like creating a world of wisdom. It's a whole other ballgame, and so easy to quit. It's so easy to like just give up and just be like a clueless, aggravated, half drunk, distracted parent and just wait for them to grow up. And then it's too late. Sorry, that was a very uplifting note to end.
No, it's super helpful. I mean, I think just having this space to really to have it laid out in this really just in a real way, like keeping it real, I think is like, especially when we're talking about the realms of like anything that has to do with like worldly life. I mean, there's just so much, because we're so used to connecting in all these different ways, like social media and all these things that just permit for like so much more illusion naturally, like, it's just the way it is. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just, that's what it is. And so I just think having spaces where, it can just really be laid out in a way where you're just keeping it real is super relieving, and I was actually thinking about that this morning of like, even like in relationship where it's like, there's all these, there's just so many things about it now where it's like it makes it, I think obviously with kids, it's different. You can't just like you're not going to get rid of your kids the way you might get rid of like your husband that you're not happy with or whatever. But it's like, I think we're so conditioned for extremes, that it's like, to be able to kind of hold the tension between like, oh, this isn't what I want, and I'm going to connect to what I want, and I'm going to fully be in this at the same time, to see what happens when I hold both of those. And I realize that it's not just about the outer circumstance, but it's actually what's in me, is, I know from my own experience, super painful in certain moments. But it's like, I think that that's what I've kind of tapped into in terms of what all the things we're talking about, of like, even with the kids, of like, all right, I'm going to like do my workout while like, Rabia does like this thing. And like, sometimes that works out, and like, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes, you know what I mean? And it's like this constant, like being able to kind of hold those tensions and hold, all of it, it's intense, and it's super challenging, like you were saying. And I think, new things get birthed. I believe that anybody listening to this, you really care. And so new things will be birthed from that experience that we just don't know yet.
For sure. Yeah.
Because it also hasn't been done a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 It's a new frontier for sure.
So there is hope, I think. Everything you just shared sounded and felt very hopeful to me.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap up, but I'd love to, if anyone has any other comments or questions, and you even feel like unmuting yourself and saying hello and sharing your name and where you are, and any questions or comments that you have, we can take a few minutes to do that before we wrap up this call. It's always nice to hear from a couple people, and thank you for those of you that did ask questions and share. But any last?
You can hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
Hey, it's Joe Whitford. I want to say thank you very much, Adriana and David. Really nice to see you both. Very grateful. Definitely bumpy, but I live in a glorious place, so I'm a lot like you. I'm very fortunate.
Yeah. Great to see you.
Yes, I just really cannot thank you. You are so generous and kind. It's very difficult, as you said, everyone is a yogi. I mean, I'm not saying that. Everyone in my community is a teacher, yogi, hippie. I don't, they have it all going on. And they're wonderful. I love them. But I kind of stick to things. I get stuck in things that I think are true. I just have to say, I'm at a point where I really need your help now. And you are my teacher. That's all there is to it. And I have embraced some other teachers, but I always stick with you, David.
Yeah. Well, let's talk.
I don't know how to do it because I can never reach you. You have a lot of different ways to reach you. That's all I want to ask for. And
okay, I'll reach out to you. We'll make it happen.
Thank you. Okay, peace, happiness, and all that.
Thanks,
Thank
Joe.
you, Adriana. I really value your words. Incredible.
Yay.
Especially my question, because it's like I created this little mini ashram room, and I really joke inside, say, no, this is my padded cell, and I could rip the walls down but they would lock me out. So I love you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. And thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Someone asked if there's any books. I'm not thinking of any off the top of my head, but I'm a huge resource for books and podcasts. And I mean, it's like my whole life, anything I'm teaching and interested in, I just like really immerse myself in it, probably to a point where it's not even healthy. Or like I have to be like forced to sit down and like watch something on TV. But nothing's coming to my mind right now, but I would definitely stay in touch with, both David and and David has, courses coming out. I'm going to put his website right here, but you can stay in touch with us. He has a parenting class coming out, and then I have a wounded healers training coming out this week. So, and just, you could reach out to me and stay in touch, and I'll think of some other resources, but none are coming to my mind right now for some reason.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
My name's Will River. I just want to say thank you to Adriana and David for helping so much. We met at Envision Festival in Costa Rica like a few months ago. So it was like pretty amazing to I don't know, just, yeah, that was an amazing experience. And like, there's so much love in both of you. And like, I'm grateful for everything you're doing and like all the protection you put over this earth. And like that festival specifically, like, I don't think anything crazy happened there. I think it was like part of what you both did helped those thousands of people. I'm here in Bellingham. I'm like on this cliff that's like pretty amazing right here. This is like where I grew up for the last 30 years, and I'm grateful to be here. But it's crazy to see how we're like speaking through this technology now, how it's like changed from so close, walking within inches of thousands of people, to like this. But I'm still grateful for being here.
Great to hear your voice, Will.
Yeah, it's great to hear both of your voices. That's why like I see this as like serendipitous, to be like, okay, I happened to wake up, and the thought that came to my mind when I woke up was like, I'm grateful to be here. And then I had this thought of like a book that I should write, or someone should, that could be called like Eat, Sleep, Download. It's like during the time of coronavirus, what we all do, like, eat, sleep. But like, and then I saw your post like 2 days ago. I was looking up like who made me feel amazing at Envision, and it was you two. And then I searched you, and then you were doing this live talk. So I see it all as like
amazing,
like you two as being these types of higher powers you're speaking of, and you know, to all of us, and in a sense. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. And that like that for me, it was extremely healing at Envision, and then now too. But like, I was already getting sober, but that like kind of just sobered me up, that session that we all did. And then I also did like a little bit of plant medicines in Costa Rica, and that was kind of like my final touches of doing anything. That then I realized to like start doing the work now. And then a few words that came to me during like an ayahuasca sitting and when I was in Costa Rica was trust, surrender, and allowing, and patience and courage. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you both, and you're both beautiful, and you're all beautiful that are here. And to stay positive, and just like, I'll try and make it to more sessions. Yours.
Right on.
Yeah, you're both awesome.
Right on. You're awesome too, Will. Yeah.
Thanks.
So there's one more question that we're gonna address, because I forgot to address it because it was earlier. And then David, I would love if we could just close maybe with like 5 minutes of meditation, because one of the most amazing things about you is your meditation teaching and guidance. And it's so deeply rooted in you know, the energy of God's love. And so, yeah, I would love if you were open to that, and just we'll address this question around hostility. Please discuss the nature and different forms of hostility that we harbor within us. The past couple days I've had in my mind, I wish to release and let go of hostility to enter love, peace, and tranquility. Do you want to?
Yeah. I mean, and Jana and I have to make a time to talk also. So I don't know exactly what you're working with, but you know, sometimes hostility it's just anger. It's like frustrated desire. Sometimes it's like stuff that we've almost taken on from other people that just is needing to sort of like push its way out, the way that like a toxin will, you know, make like a boil and push itself out of our skin. Sometimes hostility is just a habit. You know, we can get in the habit of just being like hostile people. And sometimes that hostility is actually an expression of the archetypal warrior energy. And it's like there's something in us that actually needs to be in a sort of like a righteous, you know, jihad. Careful, like that, I'm sure just like set off all these like surveillance and whatever when that expression comes over Zoom. But like in the purest sense of jihad, like in the sense of like sometimes as we awaken, there's this no. It's like a fuck no. It's like no more. Like this is done. Like out of my life. This behavior is finished. This is canceled. This way of being is done. This kind of pattern, I've done it 100 times and I'm not fucking doing it again. You know, and you could say that that's hostility. You could say that there's a hostility of like, you know, I'm just going to tackle these dishes, you know, it's done. I'm going to put on like Slayer. I'm going to put on like intense music and I'm just going to go and I'm just going to like slay these dishes. You could say that that's hostility. And so like, there's some work there of like learning how to like decipher, you know, the different flavors. And, you know, one of the thou shalt nots in our yoga wellness world is thou shalt not be intense unless the intensity is positive intensity. And, you know, that's bullshit. You know, you look at nature, which is super positive intensity, but man, it's got storm clouds and crocodiles and lightning strikes and, you know, and so I'm looking forward to you know, meeting with you and learning more about what's going on for you, Jana. But yeah, I'll just leave it at that right now, because you were asking about different kinds of hostility. And there's a yogic skill of sort of learning to decipher the healthy from the unhealthy, for sure. Meditation?
Great. Yeah, I love
Let's
that.
do it. Let's do it. So let's everyone together just take a second and before you close your eyes, just kind of like spread your arms and spread your fingers and just spread yourself, spread your face. And then just kind of bring your arms around yourself. And as you do that, kind of close yourself and squeeze yourself and close your eyes. And then again, open your eyes, spread your arms, spread your fingers, spread everything, spread your heart. And then just relax your arms and your hands. So you're closing more gently. And just let your eyes come to close. And as you close your eyes, feel your breath. And as you feel your breath, see if you can relax and feel the energy of your spirit. Whether your spirit is at peace or your spirit is in a state of hostility. Whether your mind is in a state of forgetfulness or your mind is in a state of deep devotion. Whatever is there, just very simply turn in and feel all of that. And as you turn within, just make a simple prayer, and not even in words. I'm going to keep talking because I'm leading you in this. But for you, not even in words, just open your arms, your little heart arms, to be touched by spirit with a capital S. Not your cat, not your plant medicine, not your whatever, not the God of a religion but just open yourself to be touched by that which cannot really be named. And just feel and be really honest with yourself of what needs to open inside of you to receive that energy, to receive that power. Power's here. No doubt about it. And then open deeper. And just let yourself be touched. There's like, you can imagine a little vessel inside of you. A little vessel inside of you that just needs to be filled with this nectar of divine love. All you have to do is get the lid off of it. And it shall be filled to overflow. Let it be filled to overflow. And let it overflow and fill your whole being. And overflow from your being and flow into your whole life. And on to everyone and everything in your life, including your cat. And flow into the whole world. And beyond. Okay. You can let your eyes come open. Thank you. It was a little power meditation.
Thank you so much. That's so beautiful. And thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and your insights, and just the space that you hold as a teacher is just so powerful. Love you.
Love you too. And keep up the good work. This is so fun. Can't wait to hear the other ones that are coming up. What's the next one?
Yeah. So just gently share what this is about. But the next one, next Tuesday, is going to be with a good friend of mine. She's a relational coach. Her name's Olivia Clementine, but we're going to be talking about sex and relationship. And then the week after, we're going to be talking about death with our friend Matthew, who's a death doula. And so I wanted to kind of just, gather with other like-minded people and offer some healing and just some insights, and mostly just a space for us to be in together. And I know David, like I said, has this parenting course coming up, and then also a men's course coming. So I put his website there. You should definitely stay in touch with him.
Neither of those things are on my website right now, but they will be soon. Join my mailing list, and then you'll get all that info.
Yeah, and thank you. Everyone's saying thank you. Yeah, of course. And then on Thursday, we're launching I'm teaching an 8-week course called The Wounded Healers, which is going to be just a really fun and powerful meet every Tuesday, starting at the end of the month after this kind of series ends, all about sex and God and money and death and service, like really kind of honing in on your service and how to use social media in a way that doesn't make you feel like you want to kill yourself. And, just all these things that I've really kind of gathered in terms of sharing authentically and with some level of fearlessness as well. So you can check that out on my website. Thank you from Berlin. Yeah, thank you all so much. And, we only do this to, because you're all here. So we're really grateful and humbled to be here. Yeah, I'm sending lots of love. I'm just gonna
bye, everybody.
Bye. If you want to unmute yourself and say bye, it'll be kind of crazy, but feel free to do that.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Sonia. Bye, Will.
Bye, David.
Bye, Anna. Bye, Nina.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.